Welcome to Season 5 of She Ventures. I am your host, Doria Lavanino. She Ventures is a podcast about women and their work and life pivots. I believe in the power of storytelling. I also believe that if you change one woman's life, you start to change a family or a community. Our mission is to elevate the diverse stories of everyday women in their worth. One promise, no mansplaining ever. Sit back, listen, and hit subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us at sheventurespodcast.com. Women make up half the workforce, yet their representation steadily declines as they climb the career ladder. Women comprise 40% of managers and only 29% of chief executives. And this is according to Catalyst. Today's guest has spent much of her career specializing in improving women's impact and self-confidence in the workplace. Her latest book, Quick Confidence, is a culmination of bite-sized everyday tips that she originally provided on a LinkedIn newsletter that went viral and grew to 500,000 subscribers, something that we all wish would happen by accident to us. She turned that into a book. She's an award-winning journalist, a TEDxer, and trains in people in leadership development at places like the World Bank, Microsoft, and Pfizer. She is here today to speak candidly about her new book and provide tips on common scenarios women face professionally. Selena Rezvani, welcome to She Ventures.
Thank you so much, Doria, and thank you for your awesome work lifting all of us up.
It's one at a time, right?
Yeah, but these conversations make a difference.
They do. I agree. I've always believed in the power of storytelling, and it seems as though you do as well as a book author. I wanted to start a little bit with your origin story, and I was curious specifically about any women that were either role models for you or stood out to you in any way.
My mom is one of those really superhuman, incredible people, and I lost my dad at a young age. I was 13, and my mom was like 3 parents in one. Anyone who's ever had a single mom probably knows they're the masters of doing a lot with a little bit. And that's exactly what my mom did for me. So I'm actually seeing her tonight to go out to dinner, and a lifetime isn't enough time to thank her.
I mean, as a mom, and I know you're a mom as well, I think it's in becoming a mother that we realize how much work goes into helping children grow up. And this, being a single mother on top of it is an incredible amount of work. And interestingly, whenever I hear of women talk of their single mothers, they always have such positive things to say.
I mean, it's just such an ultimate balancing act. I have 3 siblings. I didn't mention that. So it was anything but easy. And it's a beautiful thing when somebody can model strength, the kind of love where they don't squash who you are, but notice early on who you are, whether that's fiercely independent or a different way, and encourage it. So what a gift.
That is a gift, and not easy to do.
Yeah.
I've learned from my own children. So you earned your master's in social work at NYU, and then you got an MBA at Johns Hopkins. That made me curious. When did you know that you wanted to write books, firstly? And secondly, when did you know that you wanted to focus on the workplace and women specifically?
Well, Doria, I wish I could say it was this thought out path. And so
usually isn't.
Right. But I opened a lot of wrong doors, and I studied social work. I love so many aspects of it, the diagnostic questions, empowering people, problem solving. I thought that was wonderful. The issue is I could not leave that work at work. I mean, when I say it swallowed me up, I could not leave thoughts of work there. And I realized I have the utmost respect for people who can and do that work. But I could not. And I finally had to be honest with myself and say, it's time to look elsewhere. It's time to broaden this search. And believe it or not, on this very hopeless feeling day of searching, I looked on Craigslist and I found the coolest sounding job. It was applying these social work skills, but to the workplace to help employees raise up their voice. And it was at a company called Great Place to Work Institute that ranks the Fortune 100 best places to work in
Oh,
America.
okay.
Yeah. And I applied for the job and I got it. And it was such a wonderful place to pivot my skills and make a difference, though, in a way that was really meaningful to me. I had mentioned losing my dad. He died of a heart attack, and he was like the picture of workaholism. So it meant so much to me to be doing something that could reduce employees' suffering at work.
Wow, that's incredible. And so you went into social work, you had this feeling that it was something that you very much wanted to do. You liked giving back to others, helping others. And then you realized that, understandably, I think I would struggle with that as well, not being able to leave the issues at work where they belonged, and you brought them home. And so you then found this job, which pivots sometimes happen. I don't want to say by luck because effort has to go into them, but
Mhm.
sometimes we don't know exactly at the time where we're going to pivot to. And so this job happened and it ended up showing you what you love.
It did. And I think sometimes we have that inner knowing that there's another way to apply these skills. There's another path for me. There's another door I need to try. And I think when it keeps bubbling up, there's validation there that you're onto something. And I think I needed to finally listen to that. And I was so glad I did because it really ended up being a very happy home for me, that employee centered consulting that I ended up doing.
Did you do your MBA while you were working there then?
So here I was in these consulting firms, surveying employees, giving leaders the results. And you know what? I felt like as much as I loved the work, I could not speak the language of my clients. I didn't know what they meant by P&L. I didn't know what I
Right.
didn't know. And so I pursued an MBA at night. I kept working, and I'm so glad I did because I picked a program that had a little self-directed research that you as a student could do. And I had one female professor, Lindsay Thompson, and I said, I know just what I want to do. I want to interview top C-level women who've made it to leadership. And she said, Selena, I'll approve your research request on one condition. She said, you have to go after the giants, the women you think won't even entertain an email from you, let alone an interview. And I'm so glad she did because so many of those women said yes. It became my first book. It became a second book, a business, a life. So cheers to Lindsay. May we all have and be a Lindsay.
Right? As a journalist myself, that fascinates me because I know that often there's this fear of, oh, I don't know why Mary Barra is the one who comes to mind first, but anyone who's, a CEO of a Fortune 500 company or Fortune 100 company, and you think there's no way. So what were I don't want to say the tactics, but how did you get in touch with them?
Yeah, there was a few ways I approached it. And one was to try to use their time well, even in that little email pitch that I was making, like to respect their time. And so I came at it being brief and to the point. I called out a specific thing I admired, So rather than saying, Doria, I really love your work, saying your words in XYZ article, that line really burned, it's tattooed on my brain, or the specific point you made in a presentation or on a panel, to be memorable in their eyes, and to be a little bit more of a real person. Think that helped. I think telling them exactly what I was asking for and for what. I'm asking for an hour of your time. I'm happy to send the questions ahead of time so we can work on a no surprise basis. And here's what it's all adding up to. The point of this is to help women on their path to leadership, to accelerate that path. And it either resonated with people or it didn't. Many of the women who said yes, they said yes right away.
I was going to say, it's such a great how-to. That's why I wanted to ask you, because that's such a perfect way to approach. And I think it's something that our listeners can really benefit from knowing, because it applies to business as well. You always have an ask, but you should know the person that you're asking of and be respectful of their time and all of those things. And over time, I've realized that's not necessarily something people know.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes like a well-meaning person might reach out. You get the sense it's a networking meeting, but you don't know how to best help them. And sometimes that person's a little indirect. I think you want to set them up to succeed. And if you tell them ahead of time, you're upping your chances.
Oh, I love that. Yes, absolutely. We've never had so many educated women, which is wonderful. Yet the stats on women's leadership, while they show some improvement, they're still pretty dismal. For example, 8.2%, I know you must know these inside and out, of Fortune 500 CEOs are women, and 32%, or about 1 in 3, is on a board of directors. In your experience, what is preventing women from achieving parity in leadership positions?
I think first and foremost, it's workplaces that have not been reimagined or revamped to match modern society. I think it's structural. It's about conditioning that we're all used to, that a leader should only look this one way. He or she who stays in the office longest must be the most dedicated. Some of these old ideas still live and inform our reward systems, who gets promoted and celebrated at work. So I think a huge majority is around the structure of the workplace and the ways in which it needs to change. I think you can add to that I think we as women receive lots of cues, lots of conditioning to temper our confidence, to temper our power, authority, agency, to make it a little more digestible. And I don't think that helps.
It's so true. And that coding can be so subtle, but it affects women incredibly, myself included. I wanted to go back for a second because I did listen to your TEDx talk, which was incredible. I loved it. And one of the points that really resonated with me as a mother as well, you mentioned that you have twins. And you also mentioned research that I believe states that at the age of 6, it's that young that girls start to internalize messaging that their opinions are somehow not as valued. I hope I'm stating that correctly. I'm going by memory. I was curious about, in your own life, have you seen how implicit bias has affected your children?
Yes. And when I say starting from day one, I mean starting from day one. I think I even mean at my baby shower before my kids were born, when I was expecting them. And I'm talking about things as simple as the onesies I received, the little clothes and outfits. I could not help but notice how many strong power words were like emblazoned on my sons. Genius, Power Ranger. I was thinking about the messaging. Yeah, like future president, and how passive and lacking the one on my daughter were. Sweet little cupcake. And I just thought to myself, what a black and white day and night comparison. And this is how young we're talking. So absolutely, I noticed it and still do. My daughter's a little taller than my son. They're twins. And the amount of grief that causes them, or how much the world says, that's problematic. Why are you taller than him? Even boys' jobs and girls' jobs. I make a point. My son sets the table. My daughter is perfectly capable of stacking up the chairs. And I think there's so many small things we can do. I think one of the most important, no matter your gender, is to speak about women, for example, a woman politician on the news, in a way that shows respect, not taking her apart, critiquing her looks. Don't normalize that for your kids, that's a normal thing to pick apart women. I think that's such a powerful thing we can all do, is point out the positive when we're seeing a powerful woman in the spotlight.
I really like that. And you're right. I have two daughters. So my thing was, I didn't realize how much I'd internalized saying, you're beautiful. And then I was like, whoa, Doria, what are you doing? And it's amazing how much we internalize these things ourselves, right? And I love hearing how you're raising your boy as well as your girl to respect women. And I think that we all can benefit from just even slowing down and thinking about what we are saying. It makes a huge difference. The topic of your book is confidence. And so I thought it might be interesting to take a few common workplace scenarios and ask you to guide our listeners on how they might approach these scenarios.
Love that.
Very common. Okay. So I've got three of them. The first is you are talked over or you're interrupted in meetings. How can a woman handle that in a way that is direct, gets the job done, but then also isn't alienating, I suppose?
And this can be such a drag, right? Sometimes you've just gotten to the good part and bam, somebody takes over and your point is kind of forgotten. And so I think what's important about these techniques is we can use them with other people. We can be allies too to other people when we see it happening to them. One of the techniques I talk about that can help you keep your confidence is to carry right on talking. And this can feel really hard to do if you're maybe, in my case, a recovering good girl. Maybe you have a little bit of that, that pleaser tendency. It can feel kind of scary to continue to claim your space in that conversation and kind of hold on to the microphone. So one technique is to carry right on talking. Another, and by the way, some people might even add like a small, not hostile, but like hand signal, almost to say, I'm not finished. I'm still talking, in the famous words of Kamala Harris, right? I think another thing we can do is make what I call a non-judgmental observation. Sometimes it is possible someone's not aware of it. There may be that chance. They're not seeing it or aware of it. They were excited and, I think saying something like, hey, that's the third time Hannah's been cut off. I'd really like to hear the rest of her point. It's fact-based. It's not blaming or full of innuendo. It's fact-based. And I think that makes it harder to refute. And then I think one of the things that's maybe the most underdone, the most underused, is if this is rampant on your team, suggesting that you come up with new meeting norms. Some of the most progressive companies have meeting norms. They don't assume everyone meets the same way or knows the ingredients of a good meeting. They lay it out for people. They say things like everyone shares or listen more than you talk, or one person attends to the agenda, one person checks in with people on a human being level. What it is up to you and what might fit with your culture. But I think it's such a great catalyst to say, how do we want to show up in these everyday forums? Let's make it really plain and clear for people.
Transparency. I think it's such an underrated tool and so helpful. I was thinking of even the young women that I intern and having those rules, not rules. I don't know why that word like makes me uncomfortable, but just suggestions, but they're more than suggestions. Like I would like everyone to say one thing because it's about learning how to use our voice. And if you can't do that in an internship, then you're probably not going to do it in a job.
That's right. And, you bring up such a good point because not sometimes, I'd actually correct myself there and say there are always power dynamics present. So if you are more senior, you could be the most perfect leader who's welcoming and really open to suggestions. There are still power dynamics in the room. People still may hesitate to disagree with you. They may bite their tongue if you said you were supportive of an idea, but they're not. And so I love the idea of creating lots of spaces and openings for people to challenge, to disagree, to come at it another way.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things you really, I think, emphasize in your TED Talk is collaboration is so key. And when you brought up the safety, the bags that come out of cars that were created by male engineers, and by not including women, unfortunately, the initial airbags were flawed. And that happens in so many different ways.
It really does. And we can spend our lives retrofitting things to accommodate women. Or the better solution, we can include them from day one, from ground zero on creating new products, services, medicines, whatever it may be. So I'm so passionate about seeing representation at the table early and often in ideation and R&D processes, and not waiting till we're on the 2.0 or the 3.0 to think, oh, this doesn't fit women.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a huge oversight. It's hard to understand, but in a way, not so hard to understand.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say that you have trouble negotiating and you want to go into your boss and ask for a job, but you're just terrified of asking for what you have researched that you're worth. How would you recommend approaching that conversation?
First of all, good on you for, having the wherewithal to research it and the confidence to get yourself to that negotiating table. I think one helpful thing you can do is be the smartest person in the room about your going rate. And this is really hard for people because there is no one magic number in a file cabinet somewhere that says Selena Rezvani on it that I just need to find. And then there you go. I have this irrefutable data. It's always going to be kind of subjective. And I think that's maybe lesson one, is to accept it's not a bulletproof number, but you can gather as much good quality data as you can. So I would make sure that you're getting data from different sources. For example, take that call from a headhunter who's interested in you, maybe even if you're not interested in leaving, but to get a sense of the going rate for somebody with your skills and experience. They often have their fingers on the pulse of who pays what. So I think that's a really important data point. If you have a salary study in your industry, whether that's medicine or advertising or Silicon Valley, use that. It's often a lot better quality data than, say, salary.com or something more generic. So I'd come with that data, and of course, do your own competitor analysis. What do people like you in like companies, similar size and geography, pay? And then as you do, I think one really helpful thing is to stand in the other person's shoes before you get in that room. How can you think about and maybe empathize a little bit with their world perspective? For example, like, what are their goals, their most pressing goals? What are their passions within the organization? Maybe they really care about being an employer of choice, a top employer. What are their struggles? If there's any way in your pitch for more money, maybe more responsibility, or like an expanded role, can you further one of their goals? Could you alleviate one of their pain points? Could you maybe further a passion or interest of theirs? If you can do that with even one of those things, your request becomes a lot more yesable. So it moves the conversation kind of from me, can I have, I want, I need, to we.
Such a great suggestion. I love that. This is something I have experienced. I think a lot of women do. I have imposter syndrome, and it prevents you from either contributing to meetings or going after whatever it is that you really feel that you want to go after with your heart. How can building one's confidence help with imposter syndrome?
What a topic close to my heart. And it's really what my book, Quick Confidence, is dedicated to, that's feeling of doubt that can creep in. And I want to get one thing really straight, and that's to say, the most confident people don't live a life that's like free of self-doubt. So maybe change the object if it is in your mind to somehow evolve past self-doubt. They have self-doubts, people who embody confidence. It's how they work through it. It's how they self-coach through it. It's about finding kind of your inner Ted Lasso, your supportive coach kind of channel you can tune into that's going to help you overcome like even the most terrifying, daunting challenge. So don't look at, the absence of doubt as somehow the gold standard or that's winning. It's the ability to say, I can predict that generally I'll be successful at this. And if I can't, I can write myself. I have a writing reflex, kind of like a cat, and I'll find my way through it. And that's enough. That can be enough to get you to take on that exciting challenge.
Those are great suggestions. I really like that. And I also like the idea of, I think we often think everyone else is confident except for us, where I think all of us have insecurities, and it is how you choose to deal with them that makes, I think, the difference over time. And probably also community, I think, right? Having a community of mentors and like-minded women and male allies, I think probably makes a difference.
Yes, I think it does make a difference. And I think comparison-itis is one of the worst detrimental, damaging things, like as a loop that we can get stuck in. I think we've all done it, but I think it's a good thing to be careful of. And often we do it with people who we perceive have more juice, more clout, more whatever, followers, success than we do. And we often don't think about all the things that came before that success, alongside that success.
Yeah, it reminds me of something that a number of successful women today have told me. They're like, if you really want to know how someone achieved what they did, look at where they were 10 years ago and what they were doing then, because that's how they got to where they are today. It's not as if they flipped a switch and suddenly ended up writing 3 books or fill in the blank.
Right. And I think this is one of the reasons, and I love that your podcast creates like a forum for this. I think it's so meaningful when women talk about their mistakes with other women, and even capital F fails and face
Yes.
plants. I think we get so much from it, and strength and learning and maybe validation when we hear these things. So we all have them. We have to trust that there have been days that that amazing woman we look up to hid under her covers and ate a bag of Milanos and drank rosé to deal with the pain, the upset, the rejection.
Absolutely. And we've talked a lot about women, but I want to turn it to what you were talking about initially, which is organizations themselves. And you've worked within a lot of them. This is a generalization, but I was curious, how many would you say are approaching gender parity as something that they truly care about? And how many of them, it's more of like a check the box type of initiative?
I would love to report that it's a higher number, those genuine change making organizations. I think there's really strong intentions at least half of the organizations to do good, to do better, to make a difference, to be welcoming and inclusive to women. But I think things fall short. And I think one of the ways they fall short is we don't center the women's voices themselves. We might say, well, I think women would stay here longer and we could retain them if we did X or introduced ABC benefit. But we don't center their voices and their unvarnished take on the workplace. So I think that's priority one, is like not just applying solutions, but really centering their voices and looking at that in an intersectional way, looking at race and ethnicity, because every organization I go into, I find it's drastically different and considerably worse for women of color.
That's something that on the podcast, it's been so important for me, is as much as I can to get as many different points of view as possible from an intersectional perspective. And it does matter. So if a leader were to do the groundwork and ask women across the board in her or his organization, how then would we hold that leader accountable for whether change has happened or not?
I think there's different ways. I think there's certainly setting an ambitious goal around representation, for example, in leadership, in management, in middle management, and holding people to account to those goals, even leaders and managers in their performance reviews, that is graded and financially rewarded when people are inclusive and encourage diversity and representation. I think that's an important one. I think perceptions of the culture, employee engagement data is really important to see an upward trend with inclusive behaviors, that people feel they can get a fair shake, that they're compensated fairly, that they have equal promotion chances as the next person. So I think looking at that data is really important, and boards of directors holding leaders to that's considered a failure if those results decrease, for example. And I think there's other, maybe more cultural norm type ways we can look at it. For example, in every culture I go into, I ask a question in focus groups: what are the hero stories here? Who is celebrated? And guess what? 9 out of 10 times they are men in organizations. And they tend to be men who demonstrate incredible gymnastics when it comes to overwork, long hours, insane travel. And organizations sometimes don't even know that's what we're celebrating, or that's the pattern in who we celebrate. But I'd really like to see more courageous stories shared. Maybe the person who doesn't center work in their identity above all else. The person who leaves loudly at 5 p.m., not ashamed and slinking out and trying to hide it, but, unabashedly has a life outside of work. I think there's so many other stories we could celebrate, and more women leaders who are powerful and unapologetic about that power, who we need to celebrate.
Yes. And you remind me that some of the women leaders that I've spoken to, they do talk about work-life balance, and how for them, many of them, it's a top-down. I don't really like that phrase, but they do ensure that they are manifesting that themselves so that everyone around them also feels comfortable with that same idea. And it sounds similar to what you're saying.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and you need to see it to be it. And it's incredible when you see a leader with boundaries who's willing to say, no, I'm not going to stay semi-plugged in on my vacation. I'm really going to go. I will be off and I trust you to make decisions in my absence. I mean, so many powerful and positive messages when we see that kind of behavior model.
I have two final questions before we learn more about where we can, listeners can find you and your books. One is, your new book is called Quick Confidence. Are there fast ways of becoming more confident in the workplace or in life?
There are several things you can habituate that are smaller actions. They're not always these big swings we need to take. And one that I really love for social confidence, for doubling your social confidence, is to adopt what I call dog code. And what I mean is, when you go to somebody's house and they have a dog, what does that dog do generally when you walk in the door?
Usually barks, right? That's what mine does.
Okay. And how about when you come in?
When I come in, it comes up to me, very friendly.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, what do they not do? They don't talk it over with their friends. They don't overthink it.
Yes.
They simply are willing to be the first. And I think there's something really powerful we can take from that when it comes to that social confidence, which is habituating being the first. It's like your parents taught you not to talk to strangers. This is the opposite. This is saying go and talk to strangers. Why not be the first to smile at somebody at a party and extend your hand? Why not be the first to say hello to a small circle of people at a networking event? How about being the first to welcome that newcomer at your company and say hello and be friendly? When you habituate that, it's amazing what it can do for your confidence. You see yourself as an initiator of making connections, and it starts to feel normal, which is really cool.
I love that. And I'm introverted and I do not like those kind of networking meetings. So I am going to try that next time. I'm going to smile and do my best to do it first, because I am very much someone who, in those kind of situations, would prefer that someone come up to me. But why? Like, I could see how that would really make me feel more confident and in control.
I think so. I think it can change how you see yourself because you're leading with action. And when we do that and we make it almost a habit, kind of like brushing our teeth, most of us don't think twice about brushing our teeth. We just do it. We just get it done. And it kind of frees you up and frees your mental space to do other things and to think about other things, to strategize about who else you might like to meet.
Looking back on your career to date, what would you say is one thing that you are really proud of and one thing that either you regret or feel that was a mistake?
I think I'm proudest of the times I did it afraid. I have that voice in my head that's quite critical and harsh, probably like other people out there. I even named her Marjorie.
I love that. I love that.
I think the times I've been proudest, I maybe heard that critical voice in my head saying, you write a book? What makes you think you should do that? What makes you think you have enough to say about that? Or that now is the right time, that this topic is the right thing? And we can really live in that world where we discount every contribution we want to make, every bold, exciting step we want to take forward. And I think doing it while afraid, doing it while the doubts might be there is just a huge act of courage. So I applaud anybody who's willing to do it afraid. And I think when I look back at regrets, one of the things, the largest study on regrets has recently been done. And one of the top two regrets are regrets of not acting with boldness. And it's a big reason I wrote this book, Quick Confidence, is I want to see people live lives of boldness. And I think I really regret those times I talked myself out of something. I said, they're experienced enough, they're credentialed, they should do it. They know more. And I underestimated what I could do. It's really become my life's mission to help people stop doing that, to develop that healthy respect for their own strengths.
Yes. And as women, as we've talked about, we get so much external information and stigma that already is a layer of stuff that we have to kind of get through it. And then to just also, as you say, do it afraid, but do it. I don't think I've ever regretted that either when I've done it, even when I was afraid.
That's right. None of it will be wasted. I love the idea of you're either going to win or you're going to learn. And maybe taking a different approach to fails and face plants and our worries of not succeeding. Maybe that's not even one of the big options. Depending on how we choose to frame it, we always have a choice.
That is a really great point. And I'm going to give that some thought, because whenever I ask this question, I always struggle with the word. I'm like, I don't want to say regret. I'm not quite sure what I want to call it. And I like the way that you framed that. That's very well said. So where can listeners find out more about you, your books, and your work?
Well, you can find Quick Confidence anywhere books are sold. I hope you'll check it out and give me your feedback. You can also go to my website, selenarezvani.com, and you'll see there's a Confident Communicator Action Plan. So if you're somebody who feels like your words sometimes falter and you want to have that good comeback or good verbal self-defense for tricky work situations, I hope you'll take a look. And follow me on social media. I put leadership content out every day, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts and your comments there.
I love that. And I did not realize, I was on your site, I did not see that. Is it like a one-pager of things to say to help yourself in difficult situations? That is something I definitely want to check out. So I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Doria. Thanks for all you're doing.
You've been listening to She Ventures. Like what you heard? You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a show.